But the thing is, surgery does not actually address the root cause of endometriosis, and it can often come back. And in that case, you're often offered more surgery, which is my case. And I just felt like that was my lot in life, and it was just going to go on and on like that. That was until about 11 years ago, I came across a book which was to completely and utterly alter the course of my life. It was called Hormone Heresy, What Every Woman Should Know About Her Hormones. And I thought, I think I need to read that book. It was written by a doctor, a lady called Dr. Cheryl Selman. And in the book, what I realized through reading it was that not only was I not alone, but there are millions of other women in our society today experiencing hormone-related illness. And it's not just endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, cancers, infertility, fibroids, you name it. And what's so really scary is that these illnesses and these diseases are massively on the rise. I mean, literally epidemic proportions. I thought I'd bring a few statistics to show you. Now, the statistics up the top here I got from the EWG in the States, that's the Environmental Working Group, which I'll talk more about later. So just have a look at some of these rates of increase. Prostate cancer, because not only women that these hormones affect, prostate cancer increase of 85% since 1975. Breast cancer, 18%. Impaired fertility, 20%. Polycystic ovarian disease, 5 to 10%. And these statistics at the bottom are from the Endometriosis Society in the US. 6.3 million reported cases there, and they believe 89 million women in the world are suffering from endometriosis. And 30 to 40% of those women are not able to have children or have impaired fertility. Really pretty scary statistics. Now, what was amazing about this book is not only was I learning that I wasn't alone and there was a whole load of other sort of hormone-related illnesses that are also on the increase, but Cheryl Selman actually had a theory as to what was behind this. Now, that was 11 years ago, and now it's a very, very supported belief that the common denominator in many of these illnesses and diseases is estrogen dominance. You see, our bodies are a delicate balance of hormones, and it's not just estrogen and progesterone, there's other hormones as well, but they have to be in balance with each other. And what's happening to so many of us is that we're getting bombarded by estrogen, and our estrogen levels are getting really high, and they're not tempered by enough of the other hormones, particularly progesterone, to balance them out. So where is all the estrogen coming from? Why are we all getting so estrogen dominant? Well, there's quite a few sort of sources that you wouldn't even think about, and I wanted to share some of them with you today. So one is agriculture, because we routinely now feed our poultry and our livestock hormones to make them bigger, fatter, quicker, therefore make more money. So I wanted to share with you a little picture just to sort of illustrate my point. This is a chicken in the 1950s and a chicken today. And you get the idea of what I'm talking about. By the way, this was a far better picture than the cow. Our animals, the meat that we're eating is one source. Now, it's not just through our animals, but it's also the pesticides and the fertilizers that we're using, which are actually full of estrogens. So, and by the way, when I use the word endocrine disruptor in the talk today, what I'm talking about is chemicals that have an effect on our hormone levels. They create an imbalance in our hormones. So pesticides are something that I wanted to focus on because, we've seen a lot of pesticide mistakes in the past. Where we say, oh, yes, this is fine to use on our crops and on our farms. Yes, no problem. And then we realize it's completely poisonous, like DDT. And we're still experiencing issues from that. So one I wanted to draw your attention today is called Atrazine. Now, Atrazine is a pesticide which is banned in the EU, but we still use it here in Australia, and they still use it in America. And there's a fantastic TED talk that I really recommend that you download online. It's called My Toxic Baby. And in that talk, you'll learn a lot more about atrazine. But essentially, atrazine is a pesticide, and what it does is it turns on and produces estrogen. And what it's doing to frogs is it's actually turning male frogs female. And what it's also doing, and it's suspected to do, is that it's behind a lot of birth defects in humans. Now, in the US, just recently, the makers of Atrazine have just had to do a massive settlement. There was a huge class action suit brought against them for contamination, and they've just had to pay out over $100 million to sort it out. Here in Australia, there are huge cries to have it banned. In fact, just down the road from here in Lismore, Atrazine is suspected to be behind a cluster of birth defects in Lismore. And the New South Wales Greens have been really campaigning to get rid of it. But it is still being used today, and what it does is it turns on and produces estrogen. Now, another source, which is probably one that we do think about more, is synthetic hormones. You know, we've had the pill since what now, the 1960s. Now we've got patches and implants and injections and goodness knows what. And the thing with this synthetic hormones is, what do you think happens to the excess hormones that's in our bodies after taking all this? Have you ever noticed when you're taking sort of extra vitamins or something, and what happens? You actually sort of pee it out, don't you? Well, the same thing happens with these hormones. And there's one in particular, EE2, which is in the pill, which what happens to it is it gets into our water systems. Now, what's just happened in the UK is they did a study on 11 rivers in England. And guess what they found? Half the fish have been turned male. Half. And it's completely affecting the fish's fertility rates. An entire species of fish have been wiped out. Now, I believe that the frogs and the fishes are the canaries in the coal mine. And they're trying to tell us something. Nature is trying to tell us something here. Now, this estrogen in the water systems, and I mean literally it's in the water system, the drinking system, the rivers, in the UK, they have now estimated that the cleanup bill to try and get it out, because it's phenomenally difficult to get out. You have to use these special carbon filters to try and remove it. The cleanup bill, they reckon, is going to cost them £34 billion. That's how bad this is. So that's your second source that we don't often think about. The third source is in our everyday products. You would not believe it, but your moisturizers, your deodorants, your shampoos, your makeup are full of endocrine disruptors and carcinogens and toxic chemicals. And, you know, before I learned all this stuff, I was one of these people that I thought that, you know, when you wanted to put a moisturizer onto the market, you had to go through these stringent tests. You know, it's a bit like putting a new drug onto the market, and you had to put it through safety tests or something, which is actually not the case. The cosmetics industry is a self-regulating industry, and it's one of the least regulated industries that you could possibly imagine. And the thing is that what we put on our skin, as we now know, can be readily absorbed into our bodies. Now, you may have heard some of the sort of horror stories about certain chemicals. You know, parabens was one, for example. So with parabens, you may have heard there were studies done, and they found that there was parabens in breast cancer tumor. But the scientists then sort of came back and said, oh, yes, but it doesn't prove that the parabens caused the breast cancer. And that's quite correct, it didn't. But as a woman, do you really want to be using something on your body that's so invasive that it will wind up in your breast tissue? And what the study didn't point out, and it's one of the reasons why I will never use parabens, is because they're actually endocrine disruptors. And parabens have a massive effect on your hormone levels. They are endocrine disruptors. And the thing is, you know, even one lipstick alone could contain up to 7 different carcinogens and lead. In fact, Australia's leading toxicologist, a guy called Peter Dingle, he did a study of the average amount of lipstick that a woman ingests in her lifetime. Are you ready for this? 3 to 5 kilos of lipstick. Now just think about that for a minute. That's the weight of a newborn baby. Yeah? We're putting this into perspective. So wouldn't you rather be eating something that's good enough to eat rather than something that's full of toxic chemicals and endocrine disruptors and carcinogens? And the thing is, if you were to talk to the regulators about this, they'll say, oh, at such low levels, we don't believe that these chemicals are a problem. But the fact is, that's scientifically incorrect, because a carcinogen is a carcinogen, and there is no safe level for a carcinogen. A carcinogen causes cancer. So, and the other thing it doesn't do, by the way, when you talk to regulators like that, what they're not taking into account is the interaction of these chemicals and the interaction of these products. And the fact that, I mean, all of us, if you think about how many products you use in an average day, you know, we've used 10 to 15 products before we've even left the house. So it's really not taking into account just how many times we're exposed. And that's going on from birth until death. So back to the book. So there are all these different sources I learned, but what was fantastic is that Dr. Selman had a suggestion. And her suggestion was, if you are battling one of these hormone-related illnesses, she talked about a thing called natural progesterone cream, which in this country must be prescribed by a doctor. And what it does is it basically puts the progesterone into your system, so it sort of balances your hormones out a bit more. What she also suggested is that you change your diet to an anti-inflammatory and an organic diet, and that you detox your life and you stop using products that contain these sorts of chemicals. Now, I was in pain, and I thought, what have I got to lose? I'm going to try all three things. So I tried all three things. I got the cream. I changed my diet. I went organic. And I completely chucked out everything that was in my bathroom. I mean, literally. And I moved to natural and organic products. And when there wasn't a natural or organic product available, I didn't use it. So I did this completely radically. And I did it for 3 months. And after 3 months, I fell pregnant. Which is a life-changing event in and of itself, obviously. But when you think you're never going to have kids naturally, it's amazing. So I was obviously overjoyed, absolutely and utterly overjoyed. And then I thought, hang on a minute. If that's had such a profound effect on me in 3 months, imagine the millions of other women out there who don't know that there are more natural options available to them. And that got me a little bit passionate. And then what happened was, during the course of my pregnancy, my endometriosis cleared up. My health and my vitality skyrocketed. And I became like the torchbearer for the natural and organics industry. And the more I read, I started to just research everything about this topic, you know, toxic-free living, natural approaches to hormone-related illness. And the more I learned, the more passionate I became. And I went, okay, you know what? If I actually manage to give birth to a healthy baby here, I'm going to completely change the course of my life. And my life's purpose from that point on will be to motivate and inspire other women to make more natural choices in their life. And my little girl Lola was born, and she's now 10 years old. And she is the absolute joy of my life. And after Lola was born, I started doing exactly what I'm doing today, which is to travel around the country, and eventually I travel around the world, talking to groups of women and sharing the information that I've learned. And that led to forming Thriving Healthy Women, which is a not-for-profit educational website. And people used to ask all the time, well, what brands are natural? What products are okay? And I used to start making recommendations to people. And then millions of women started to ask about makeup. And because there was no other brands out there doing genuinely natural makeup, I thought, you know what? I want to prove that this can actually be done. And that's what led to the creation of Anika. So what do you do with this information that you've learned here today? What is the practical implication of this? The message is simple. If you want to avoid hormone-related illness, or if you're battling hormone-related illness, then minimize your exposure. And in order to do that, it's simply a case of making more natural choices. You know, when you're in the supermarket, if you can afford to buy organic, then do so. If you can't afford that, can you grow your own vegetables? Or can you buy your produce at a farmer's market where you know where that produce has come from or how he's treated his animals? In terms of consumer products, there are hundreds of brands out there now who specialize in products that are made without these chemicals. Because my belief is, And my dream is that when enough consumers start making informed choices, that these companies will follow the dollar, and that will be the only thing that will make them change. But together, we can make that change. I want to leave you with one little last thought, which is, there used to be a bumper sticker that was around years ago, and it was a bumper sticker which said, "I'm out of estrogen and I have a gun." Well, I've put a new spin on that. I have too much estrogen, and now the gun is pointing at me. Thank you for listening.
So as all the women in the audience are furiously wiping off their lipstick, I'd like to thank Miranda again for probably making a lot of us feel that the ball can be put back in your court on a lot of health issues. So up next, we've